Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday, everyone. 249 solo shots on the young season here. Episode 102, April 12th, 2025. I'm just so excited to be here with you all. It's a colder weekend here. Of course, spring is here. Baseball is in full swing. But the weather has still not got with the program just yet. But who has gotten with the program, and it's very fitting with them being, the great North, is the Toronto Blue Jays have finally gotten a superstar player to ink a long-term mega deal with their franchise. That's right. I know I'm last to market with this, just when my show falls, but Vladdy Jr. signs a 14-year, $500 million extension to stay with the Toronto Blue Jays until he's 40 years old. What's really remarkable about this deal, before I get into the ramifications, is that they're giving him $325 million in signing bonuses payable through the length of the contract. So he'll be getting $17 million the next 2 seasons in just base salary and base signing bonus, 16 in 2028, 15 in 2029, 14 and a half from 2030 to 2032, 12 and a half for 2033 and 2034, 11 and a half in 2035, 10 and a half in 2036, 7 million in 2037, and 6.25 million for 2038 and 2039 respectively. And the reason why this is a huge deal, and why I think a lot of these extensions, we had a whole Oprah extension episode last week, was about the impending lockout that is about to happen here in 2026, when there might be a work stoppage, there might be a lot of things that get changed with the new collective bargaining agreement and negotiations, hopefully not another strike. A lot of these players want to get locked in, and they want to get locked in now. And Vladdy Jr. getting, $325 million in signing bonuses, no money deferred. Those signing bonuses are exempt from anything that happens. If there's a work stoppage, if there's a strike, he gets those, and he gets those as a resident of Florida, as opposed to living in Toronto during the season, where his salary will get those Canada taxes, but his signing bonuses, which total $325 million, will be exempt from state income taxes. So the Blue Jays really rolled out the blue carpet for Vladdy Jr., saying, we will do whatever it takes to get you to stay. And while it on paper is the third largest contract ever signed in Major League Baseball history, behind Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani, in terms of present day dollars and value, it is actually ahead of Shohei Ohtani's because of all the deferments in that deal. When we talk about Vladdy Jr., we're talking about a true superstar of the game. He was going to be a 26-year-old free agent, a guy who just came off a MVP caliber season in 2024, the face of the franchise. He was born in Canada, while his father, Vlad, was a star for the Montreal Expos. And the Blue Jays essentially got to a point that the Red Sox, and I know this firsthand, got to with Rafael Devers a few years ago, where they waited too long to extend him. And it got to the point where they had to pay a premium to lock him in long-term, so he wouldn't test free agency, so he wouldn't walk away. Because if Rafael Devers left the Red Sox at the time that he signed that extension, after Mookie Betts had been traded, after Xander Bogaerts had left, the fan base would be up in arms. The team would have no identity. It would have nobody left from that 2018 World Series team, which is one of the best in Red Sox franchise history. The Blue Jays were kind of in the same situation, where Vladdy Jr. walked in free agency this year after missing on Shohei Ohtani, after missing on Juan Soto, after, throwing money out to all these different guys over the years. Some have worked, some haven't. It would be a long-term rebuild for the Blue Jays franchise. There wouldn't be a lot of hope. And that's part of the reason why I picked the Blue Jays to win the AL East this year. Was I feel like this offseason, they put win now pieces around Vlad and Bo in their contract years, and they were really going to go get it. And they've been, very good so far. They're in first place currently in the AL East. And now Vladdy Jr. is locked up as a core piece for them in the future, which hopefully allows them to, talk to other big time free agents and say, hey, you get to come play with Vladdy. He's locked up for the next 14 years. So you're guaranteed to be playing with one other superstar in the lineup, as opposed to the last couple of free agencies where it was like, well, you haven't locked up Vladdy, you haven't locked up Bo yet. Who am I going to be playing with in the second half of this deal? The third, fourth year of this deal, if you don't get it done. So, yeah, hopefully that's a good bargaining chip for them, but they had to overpay because they waited too dang long to extend him. The Yoshinobu Yamamoto contract of, a 25-year-old controllable player hitting the market, Juan Soto hitting free agency at 26. This inflated the number that Vladdy Jr. got. It's going to be very, very hard for him to be worth, $35.6, I believe, $1 million a year throughout the length of this deal. First basemen typically do not age the best, even with the universal DH. I'm sure he will, by 30 will be the Blue Jays full-time DH as opposed to first baseman. But the Blue Jays had to do this deal, and they kind of got forced into it. They paid up. If Vlad Jr. hit the open market, I'm not so sure $500 million would have been on the table anywhere else. I know for a fact that over $300 million in signing bonuses, $0 deferred, would not be available anywhere else. So the Blue Jays, did everything they could to make sure Vlad put his name on the dotted line of that contract and locked himself into being a Blue Jay for life. And this is huge for Vlad. I think in terms of his Hall of Fame trajectory, this is a guy who has been off to a really, really great start. And I'm excited to see, what he does going forward with the Blue Jays. I don't think he necessarily needs to win a championship to make the Hall of Fame, but in terms of this contract being worth it, he needs to be that piece that brings in other superstars and leads to the next Blue Jays championship in the next 15 years for this contract to not be looked at as, one of the bigger overpays or disappointing contracts in the history of the sport. So far in his career, 21.7 WAR, 920 hits, 160 home runs. He's a 288 career hitter. He scored 480 runs and drove in 512 in 6 seasons. He's stolen 20 bases. He is a okay walk to strikeout ratio. Career on base 363, slugging 498, 136 OPS plus. So far this season, he's been a league average bat. But like I said, the age and how long this process they waited to get this deal done, the price just kept going up to the point where it hit ridiculous numbers. When you look at other big time first baseman deals, Albert Pujols and Miguel Cabrera were over a decade ago, and those were in the 200 million range for their 30s. You look at the Paul Goldschmidt, the Freddie Freeman, the Matt Olson deals of late that were longer term. Those were in the high 100 millions. I'm not saying Vladdy, in the open market couldn't have gotten between 300 and 400 million from other teams. That was my first response when I saw Vladdy got the extension with the Blue Jays done was, damn, I really wish the Red Sox had a chance to go after him. But I know the Red Sox would not have put $500 million out there for Vlad when they paid Rafi, $320. So it's really, really going to be a big deal for the Blue Jays fans to have that, jersey that's likely going to go up in the rafters, end his career with, the most home runs, the most RBIs, the most hits potentially of any Blue Jay ever. So Vladdy Jr., is locked into one of these long-term deals, which really helps his ability to compile a Hall of Fame career worth of statistics the rest of the way. But in terms of the contract and the value, it is really, really shocking. You're seeing all these, 20-something-year-olds getting locked in early to these deals, whether it be as of late, with Garrett Crochet, Christian Campbell, Jackson Merrill, Brandon Pfaadt, or even, in previous years, Jackson Chourio and Ronald Acuna Jr. and all those Braves guys. Locking the players in early for their 20s, I think, is people are going to be trying to do that more and more, so they don't have these situations where they're on the brink of free agency and you quite literally have to overpay or let them walk. So really, really tough. You don't want to be in a situation like the Red Sox were, where he was going to test free agency and you have to trade him for not a lot of return because you waited till the bitter end. So really, really happy for Vladdy. This is, generational money. It's a big time deal. I don't think any first baseman's going to match that anytime soon. I don't know if any other player's going to hit $500 million anytime soon. I know a lot of people were immediately pointing to Kyle Tucker, saying, oh, wow, Kyle Tucker is a more valuable player than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He is 3 years older. And, that means he's going to get a shorter deal. The AAV might be higher, but will it add up to $500 million? I don't know. I think Kyle Tucker's camp is going to want to beat Mike Trout of $426 million. I think that's very possible. I think 430, his jersey number 30, I think that's very, very possible for him to get on the open market, like a 10 for 430 type of deal. But I don't think Kyle Tucker's a $500 million player. I don't think Vladdy Jr. was necessarily a $500 million player. Before Shohei Ohtani raised the bar and Juan Soto became, a generational free agent in terms of the age and his accolades at that age when he hit free agency, the rising tide lifts all boats, and guys who were getting mega deals before in the $300 million range, the Bryce Harpers, the Manny Machados, the Trey Turners of the world, they're feeling great, with the money that they got at the time. But now they're looking at it and they're like, wow, like I could have gotten a lot more money if, someone else pushed the threshold earlier in the free agency era, because these teams have the money to make these mega long-term deals happen. So really, really interesting when you dive into it. I think Pete Alonso is going to have a lot more suitors this offseason, especially the way he's swinging the bat right now. I think he's not going to be begging to work. I think there's going to be a team that's willing to give him, somewhere in the $150 to $200 million range, give him that Matt Olson, Freddie Freeman, Paul Goldschmidt type deal, and just lock in that kind of run producing value at first base for what seems like a bargain compared to what the Blue Jays played. But, very, very excited to see what this has to do with the future of contracts. Will some of these young players start turning down these, $1 to $300 million extensions? Because, you look at a player like Bobby Witt Jr., who signed his extension not that long ago with the team. He very well could have, surpassed $500 million if he just waited till he got closer to free agency or went to free agency. So it's will you take the bird in the hand or will you bet on yourself and really push the envelope? Because it seems like the longer you wait, the chance you have to get a much bigger distance in salary. So really, really, really interesting. I know a lot of people have beaten this story to death. It's very, very exciting. It's one of the biggest stories of the young season, and it has a ton of ramifications, not just for the Blue Jays, but for the rest of Major League Baseball to see how this goes the rest of the way. Now, we are about 10% way through the 2025 Major League Baseball season. Small sample size, I know. It's a couple weeks worth of games. But we can now start, forming some opinions. They're not rock solid opinions. They're still very fluid. But there's some trends that are forming that I'm very happy about. I'm very intrigued about. And there's some where I'm a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. So we're going to talk about some trends that I do like across the major leagues. There's in the AL East, I do like, George Springer reviving his career a little bit and, being part of the first place Toronto Blue Jays. I think his offensive contributions have been huge. I think the Blue Jays have shown why, they are a win now team and have the ability to compete in this AL East. So I'm very, very excited about the 2025 version of the Blue Jays. With Jeff Hoffman slamming the door shut in the ninth inning. George Springer bounced back. Bo Bichette has been better. You got great defenders like Jimenez and Dalton Varsho. The pitching has been very, very good. Kevin Gossman is having a bounce back like I expected. Jose Barrios, after the opening day blunders, has been pretty good. Bowden Francis and Lucas, you got all these guys just performing way better than expected. And I hope they can continue that trend going forward. I think they're definitely going to be in the thick of things here in the at least. In the April, good about the Cleveland Guardians right now. I know they're not in first place. The Tigers have looked really good to start the year. But the Cleveland Guardians are getting offensive contributions outside of Jose Ramirez. We know what their pitching is. It's going to be above league average. It's going to be very serviceable. Jose Ramirez has been their offense. And the fact that they're getting offensive contributions, from Kyle Manzardo as a breakout, across the diamond, you got all these guys contributing to winning and to offensive explosion and to, a very, very fun Cleveland Guardians team that, I know they're not the sexy pick, especially with how the Tigers and Royals have bounced onto the scene. But I think the Guardians, the fact that their offense has more than one guy is going to go a long way throughout this major league season, especially when you look at, the depth that the Tigers have or the depth that the Royals have in their lineups. They're very much on par with them now. And I really think that their bullpen and their pitching is the differentiator there. They've been there before. They have success. They have a ton of guys. In the AL West, my kind of trend that I've been enjoying is what the Angels have been doing on offense. I talked about it at the beginning of the offseason because the Angels were first to market. They went out there and they, signed a bunch of guys, and they were very aggressive in the margins this offseason, bringing in veterans like Kenley Jansen, who notched his 450th save, fourth closer to ever do so. Jorge Soler, Travis d'Arnaud. They have young players like Logan O'Hoppe. Kyron Paris has broken out. Zach Neto's on his way back from the IL. It's a very, very exciting team. And Mike Trout being healthy, starting the year, he's tied for the major league lead in home runs with 6. This Angels team is much improved. I'm not saying they're going to stay in second place or even win this division. Every team in the AL West currently has a negative run differential. But the Angels, like I said, are going to be better than people expect. This team, has the ability to shock some people, to be competitive, and that's, I think, all Angels fans have wanted, the last couple of years of Shohei Ohtani's tenure and since he left, is they just want to be a competitive baseball team. They don't want Mike Trout to have no shot at the postseason the rest of his career. They just want to be competitive, and they're doing that right now. Guys like Yohan Moncada, Nolan Schanuel, Joe Adell, they have contributors everywhere, and it's very, very promising. When you have okay starting pitching and a lineup that's banging like this, you're going to make some noise. In the National League, the Phillies, I love that they were able to be the first team to beat the Dodgers. Jesus Luzardo has looked fantastic so far in a winning environment. I don't know why, no other team was calling the Marlins on a buy low opportunity for Jesus Luzardo. Zach Wheeler, Cy Young caliber stuff, as I want to see. Their pitching in the rotation at least has been phenomenal. Their lineup is deep. This Phillies team is going to be a real problem. They're in the thick of things right there with the Mets right now. The Braves being off to a bad start is really good for them for winning the division. It's going to be really, really exciting to see this Phillies team. This might be the last real hurrah that this core has to try to win a title before they are forced to shake things up, whether that be with the manager or whether it be with the players in the lineup. Got some expiring contracts and some guys can get moved around. So the Phillies have been off to a hot start, and that they're a serious title contender through this 10% sample size. In the NL Central, everybody is talking about the Cubs. I'm wearing a Cubs shirt. They have the best run differential in Major League Baseball right now. The Kyle Tucker addition has been huge. Dansby Swanson and Seiya Suzuki have came out firing at the beginning of the year. Matt Shaw, Michael Busch, those guys are contributing. Nico Horner, Ian Happ, you know what you're getting with those guys. Pete Crow Armstrong has had some games to go along with the spectacular defense in center field. And they have a good rotation. Shota Imanaga and Justin Steele, Matthew Boyd. They're a good team. They're going to be very competitive. But right now, even though the Brewers got the doors blown off them to begin the season, they're 8-2 in their last 10 games, and they're tied for first place right now. No one wants to give the Brewers respect. I understand why. They continue to let good players leave and replace them with guys that you're not as familiar with. But this Brewers team, with Jackson Chourio, who's looking like a real MVP candidate earlier than I was expecting. I thought it was going to take a couple years for him to get to that level of play. He might be a real, 6, 7, 8 WAR player this year. The Christian Yelich bounce back has been really nice to see. Him contributing. Even the less major guys that haven't been hitting big time, but still have a ton of talent. Garrett Mitchell, Joey Ortiz. Rhys Hoskins has not been hitting to start the year. He's still there. William Contreras is one of the best catchers, if not the best catcher in Major League Baseball. And despite their rotation not having a bunch of big names, Brandon Woodruff is on the way, from coming back from injury to be a kind of addition before they make any moves. I loved the Jose Quintana deal. It was shocking that he was still out there. He just became the 24th pitcher in Major League history to win against all 30 teams the other day. This Brewers team has been slept on. I slept on them last year. I'm not going to sleep on them again. As good as the Cubs have been, as more star-studded and exciting as they are, they burned me last year. And I know a lot of people went right back in and bet on the Cubs to beat the Brewers again. I had the Cubs winning the division last year. They might be a wild card team, but this is the Brewers division until it isn't. And I'm going to stick with them. The Brew Crew, the trends so far this year have been really, really promising to see. And in the NL West, the trend I'm liking to see is that the Dodgers aren't, late years ahead of everyone. The Giants are 10-3. The Padres are 11-3. Like, this is going to be a real race. I mean, the Snakes are 7-7, despite some iffy pitching results so far. This is a real division. Sorry, Rockies fans. I always apologize when I talk about the NL West. Chase DeLander and Zach Veen getting called up is exciting, but the Rockies don't really have any, thing to be happy about here with this trend. But I'm just excited to see, the Padres. Nick Pivetta with a big start the other night. He was a huge addition. Another guy that was out there for way too long just because he had the compensatory pick attached to him. The San Francisco Giants have bounced back with, the Buster Posey effect, everyone's saying. If they had Pete Alonso right now playing first base, I know Wilmer Flores as a first base DH has been awesome to start the year, but if they also went out and signed Pete Alonso while he was just sitting out there being that power middle of the order bat that they need, I would have probably picked the Giants to make the playoffs this year. But they were outside my playoff picture, and, they might force themselves to be in it as we get to midseason and those adjustments are made. The Dodgers are still, the team to beat in all of Major League Baseball, but the fact that, the teams in their division are getting better and being competitive is really, really good for the game. You want to see, that kind of, turnover year to year. You don't want it to be, one team beating up on everyone else for an extended stretch. Now, in terms of trends I'm not a big fan of, the Diamondbacks pitching staff has not been what I thought it was going to be to begin the year. They've been all right. Zach Gallen had a huge start against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. But when you look at, Merrill Kelly's results, Eduardo Rodriguez, Jordan Montgomery's already out for the year with Tommy John. Brandon Pfaadt's been, what you could expect from Brandon Pfaadt. Corbin Burns has not been up to that contract yet. I'm a little worried about the Snakes with how improved the Giants and Padres seem to be. I wasn't expecting them to be this hot out of the gates. But the Diamondbacks have that offense and they have the talent in the starting rotation where I could definitely see them, climbing up and being in first place at some point during the regular season here. I just need to see more from that starting pitching staff because it should be one of the best in the game, and right now it's more middle of the road. In the NL Central, I'm a little bit disappointed with Terry Francona and the Reds. I love Terry. He's a future Hall of Fame manager. He's going to get to 2,000 wins during his tenure here now back in Major League Baseball. But the decisions that he's been making, especially with the bullpen out in Cincinnati, has really put a damper on a lot of people who were picking them to go from worst to first in the NL Central. I was telling you that was not the right bet to make, that the Blue Jays were the best worst to first bet in major leagues. But they don't have a lot of talent in the bullpen right now, especially with Diaz sidelined. But they seem to be making a lot of bad matchups, leaving pitchers out there for too long. And outside of Hunter Green, the pitching staff has been relatively disappointing as a whole, on top of the situations that Francona has been putting them in. So the Reds have been disappointing because a lot of people were picking them to be, a exciting breakout team, and they have not been super competitive, even on the offensive side of the ball in that bandbox of a ballpark. The Braves, 3-10 start. Jurgensen Profar suspended for steroids. Sean Murphy is finally back from injury, but he's not the only player hurt. You're waiting for Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna Jr. to come back. You're behind the Marlins and the Nationals. I expected the Nationals to be better than people expected. The Marlins, 3 straight walk-offs to start the year against the Pirates, and they've had some pretty good performances. But the Braves, man, it's ugly. No team had ever started 0-7 in major leagues and actually made the playoffs, and they're trying to be the first one. I think they still can do it. At full strength, I think they're better than the New York Mets that are in first place right now. But you have to make up some ground. You're already 6 games back, and you have to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. Atlanta. You started the year against LA and San Diego. I understand, but you gotta just bear down and beat the teams you're supposed to beat. That comeback win with the Marcelo Ozuna walk-off was exactly what this team needed. They need to win those close games. They need to get some momentum back, and I hope they do so here as we continue into the rest of the 90% of the Major League Baseball season. The AL West, the Houston Astros have been disappointing to me. I hate that Spencer Arrietty's already on the injured list. Hunter Brown and Framber Valdez have been good, but the rest of the pitching staff has not been what you'd like to see from the Astros, but it's mainly the hitting. Jose Altuve, as bad as his defense has been, he still hits. I mean, that guy's a Hall of Fame hitter. Yordan Alvarez has not had the start you'd like to see from him. Isaac Paredes just hit his first home run despite being a pull specialist in that ballpark with the shortest left field porch. I want to see more from the Houston Astros. Christian Walker, Yainer Diaz has been one of the one of the worst catchers in the major leagues this year, both offensively and defensively rating wise. I want to see more from the Houston Astros going forward. I picked them to win the division. I still think they have a good chance of winning the division, but I need to see them start acting like themselves. In the AL Central, the Twins have been a big disappointment for me. I was really screaming for the bounce back. They already have injuries loading up. The breakouts of guys like Matt Wallner have not been what I was expecting them to be. The pitching staff has just been okay when they have the talent to be much better than that. Even the bullpen's been getting lit up. Duran and Jackson, some of those studs they have in the bullpen have not had lights out starts. So I want to see the Twins get back in the thick of things. I don't know if they can make the playoffs with the way the Royals and Tigers both look to be, legit from last year. But the fact that they're, within one game of the White Sox is pretty sad right now. They need to get back up. And in the AL East, of course, it's the Toronto Blue Jays that, are in first place, but the Baltimore Orioles, the other bird, 5-8 start. They're only 2.5 games back. Like, that's how good the AL East is. The worst team in the AL East is still pretty good. But Charlie Morton experiment has not been working. Sugano's just been okay. Grayson Rodriguez hurt. Gunnar Henderson still working his way back. The Orioles don't have a lot of momentum going right now. And while I do believe that, improvement from Craig Kimbrell last year to Felix Bautista at the back end of the bullpen will help them win these close games and keep them afloat, if they want to, get in the thick of things with the way the New York Bats have been, with the way, Tampa Bay has been playing, Tampa Bay style baseball, the Red Sox are much improved. The Blue Jays are really, really good right now. They need to, start playing Oriole brand baseball again. They need to go out and trade for a Sandy Alcantara or a starting pitcher, way before the trade deadline gets here, and do what they can to salvage this disappointing start. Because right now they're not looking like a playoff team. I know a lot of people are backing out on them. A lot of people that picked them, a lot of people that picked them to miss the playoffs are victory lapping right now. I'm worried, and I need them to, start playing Oriole brand baseball. Those baby birds, they got to start hitting. Jackson Holiday, Heston Kjerstad. I know Jordan Westburg's had a good start, but they need to start hitting really bad. Going forward, here at the Solo Shot Sports Podcast, with the throwback down the third base line to this day in baseball history. And, April 12th had quite a few things for me to choose from. But whether it be Robin Yount's first major league hit on this date in 1974, whether it be, Hall of Fame birthdays that have happened throughout the major leagues. The reason I love this segment so much is because baseball has such a rich history, and it's being written every single day. That's what I like to tell the people that like the old school version of baseball, and so they can't watch the new players, the new games. Is history is being written every day, and whether it be the first major league hit of a guy who goes on to have over 3,000 with one franchise like Robin Yount, whether it be the opening of parks like Shibe Park for the A's defeating the Red Sox 8-1 on this date in 1909. The last game ever in 1912 of Tinkers to Evers to Chance for the Chicago Cubs, the last game where all three played together. That was a huge deal and a big part of early baseball. Cleveland acquiring Hall of Famer Tris Speaker. There's so many interesting things that happen throughout the game's history, whether they just be, the effect of a game, whether it be someone that was in attendance, like President Harry Truman throwing out the first pitch for the Athletics in Kansas City for their first opening day there in 55. The game has so much beautiful history to it, and it can even be relatively recent. Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle added to Monument Park on this day in 1970. Nolan Ryan homered his debut with the Houston Astros in 1980 to help himself out, the pitcher helping himself. Jim Rice walk-off grand slam. The thing that really stuck out to me, though, was on this date in 2003, Fenway Park, the Green Monster, had a new look. So instead of a net on the top of it to, catch homers, they added seats on the Green Monster. And now, you can sit 310 feet away and 40 feet above to watch baseball games. And for any Red Sox fan out there, I'm sure that's always been a dream of yours to sit on the Green Monster and watch a baseball game. I've thought about it for years. And, tickets are expensive compared to like an outfield bleacher seat. But if you go for the right matchup, Chicago White Sox are going to be in town for Patriots Day weekend next weekend. You can get, reasonably priced tickets to stand or sit atop the Green Monster and watch a game at Fenway. And that's really, really cool that a ballpark that had this wall since its inception in 1912 decided to paint it green in the 40s, call it the Green Monster. The fact that it finally got to the point where fans could sit atop it, could spectate from that height. And instead of it being, a nosebleed bleacher seat, it be this premium special experience. It's just really, really cool. And there's a million little things like that I just love about the game of baseball. I love about the history. I love about the parks. And I'm happy to share it with you here every Solo Shot Saturday. I'm going to leave you with this. Just remember, there's those trends I like. There's those trends I don't like. There's a lot of trends that I glanced over or didn't speak about. There's a lot that can happen. There's still, 140 plus games for every single Major League Baseball team to play this year. Every team's going to go on a run. Every team's going to have a slump. But a lot can happen. And then following 90% of the Major League season, that can take teams right now that don't look like a playoff team to World Series contenders, teams that look like they can't be stopped, to teams that, sell everyone at the trade deadline, and everything in between. This Major League Baseball season is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Enjoy it. It's a game of chess. Soak it in. Go to a ballpark, probably when it's a little warmer out, the weather's better. It's been pretty rough here on the Northeast, at least lately. But enjoy the baseball season for what it is. Don't get too high or too low with what's happening right here in the 10%. Because while it does all add up the same, it really matters how you're playing heading into October. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking me out this Solo Shot Saturday. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you like and subscribe here on YouTube or leave a review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really helps out the show. And make sure to share this show with a friend who loves the game of baseball as much as we do. I'm Dom Manna. I'll see you guys next week.